welcome to this week's episode of Seeds of Music. I'm your host, Kyle Williams, and this is the web's #1 resource for independent artists. This is our weekly web show where I bring on music industry professionals and successful independent artists to talk about the ways in which we can build bigger, stronger fan bases and earn more income from our music careers, something that most people say you can't. So, real quick announcement right now. We have an iTunes podcast version of the show. It's audio only. So, if you just like listening to the show, you can head over to your iTunes account, punch in to the search bar, Seeds of Music, Rise Above the Noise, click subscribe, and you get all the episodes, current and past, downloaded straight to your mobile device. And while you're there, if you want to help out with the show, please leave a rating and a review. The reason this will help out is because when you do that, it helps improve our ranking within the iTunes podcast search database. So we'll be more at the top and we'll get more exposure for the show and more musicians can start tuning in. So with that out of the way, let's go on to our our current guest for this episode, Jay Cooper. He is an entertainment lawyer, the founder of Los Angeles Entertainment Practice, and he studies entertainment law, intellectual property, and copyright. And just to give you a rundown on a few things he's done, or things that he's a member of outside of just being an entertainment lawyer, he is the advisory board member and founding member of the Entertainment Law Initiative, former president and current member of the Recording Academy, co-chairman of the Alliance of Artists and Recording Companies, co-founder of the International Association of Entertainment Lawyers, and you'll recognize this, board member of Sound Exchange. And he currently represents acts as big as Katy Perry and has represented acts in the past such as Sheryl Crow. So this guy is really, really knowledgeable. He's been in the music industry for quite some time, working with top name acts. So it's a real treat to have someone on his level on the Seeds of Music web show. And the main topic of this episode is why musicians need to stand up for themselves. Why we need to stand up for ourselves when it comes to things that affect us on the business end, whether it's the contracts we sign or the policy on Capitol Hill. And a couple more topics that we're going to cover. Why musicians need to be either knowledgeable about the business or have someone competent on their team, and when you should actually seek out this type of representation. Should you do it early on, when your career isn't really gotten off the ground, or should you do it once you start to hit it big, whatever that means, or your audience starts to get larger, much larger? And how can music policy be influenced by artists? Well, according to Jay, we can influence policies on Capitol Hill that affect how much we get paid. We just have to speak up. So let's jump right in. All right, Jay, first off, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on to this episode of the Seeds of Music web show. It's really awesome to have someone who's, I'm looking at your list of professional and community involvement, like all the associations you're a member of. It's pretty impressive. You got Sound Exchange here, co-founder of the International Association of Entertainment Lawyers. How long did it take you to accumulate all of that?
A long time.
Yeah, how long have you been an entertainment lawyer? I'm just curious.
Oh, I've been practicing over 40 years, maybe close to 50 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Long time.
And do you remember the first time you took on a musician as your client?
Yes, very, very well. The very first client, very, very, very first music client I had was a composer by the name of David Rose. His name is not familiar to a lot of people, but he was a well-known composer at that time. He composed The Stripper, which most people know, the song The Stripper.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the music conductor on the Red Skelton show, and he composed a lot of television themes at that time. He wrote another very famous piece, probably not played so much these days, called Holiday for Strings.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was my very first music client. Very first.
Was he easy to work with?
He was a terrific. I still represent his family to this very day. He was a terrific man.
Awesome. Do you have any rock and roll clients or anything like that?
Do I? Well, I represent Katy Perry. I represent Sheryl Crow. I represent James Taylor.
Oh, nice.
Amongst others. I have over the years represented. I've represented Lionel Richie. I've represented Tina Turner. I've represented a lot of people in the industry. I represented the Byrds back in those days. I represented the Monkees.
Nice.
I represented Buffalo Springfield,
Uh-huh.
so I've gone the gamut.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome. And in this time, like, have you noticed any? I mean, have you represented any artists like let's talk about Gamut, from small time artist to an artist that's as big as Sheryl Crow?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I first started representing, as an example, Sheryl Crow, she was a background singer.
Mm-hmm.
She was a background singer. She was on tour with Michael Jackson, on tour with the Eagles, etc.
Yeah.
When I started representing Katy Perry, she was performing at the Hotel Cafe in the Mint for an audience of 3 to 5 people.
Oh yeah.
So, but each of them had tremendous talent, and they had the talent, and they had the persistence, and the wherewithal to go ahead, yeah, and become what they have become.
And so, and it seems like they also were a step ahead because they were seeking out legal help. To like they were in the mindset that was something that they were.
I'm not here.
Can you hear me now?
I'm not hearing your question. There was a big echo in there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear it better now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm leaning a little bit closer to the mic here. So, actually, what I was saying was, did you notice that when you, I mean, I would think that working these artists in particular, they have a different kind of mindset when it comes to like the business side of music. Case in point, that they were getting representation from an entertainment lawyer to make sure they had all of that squared away. Because a lot of musicians, they tend to kind of ignore the business side, ignore the legal side of music, and just focus on just solely making music. And I know that when I spoke with you over the phone before we set up this interview, you had mentioned that there are forces, at work that are pretty much looking to see that artists get paid the least amount possible. And I'm just like curious, like when it comes to that, what can artists do to actually turn that from a negative thing into a positive thing? Like how can we deal with those forces at work?
It's a good question, but let me start with the fact that we're in something called the music business.
Mm-hmm.
The second word in that is business.
Yeah.
So talent is a gift. Not everybody has that gift, but along with it, they ultimately, the beginning of most artists' careers, they just want to perform. They want to perform, or they want to write their music. They want to create in whatever capacity. But at some point along the line, they realize that maybe they get married, they're going to have a family,
Yeah.
They may want to buy a house, they may want to buy a car,
Yeah.
and ultimately that talent has to be converted into the ability to make money also.
Yeah.
So it is important for an artist to recognize the fact, and while most artists, the vast majority of artists really want to concentrate on their talent and their creations, and which they should, then they need to get somebody that they trust to take care of the business side, because ultimately the people who acquire music, who sign musical artists, who consume music, they're treating it as a business.
Yeah.
And so the artists must treat it as a business themselves in some fashion, or have somebody do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if for a successful artist, there is an awful lot of money to be made and a lot of future security to be made
Yeah.
as a benefit to their talent, and they need to take advantage of it. So they need to have proper, competent, and experienced representation.
Mm-hmm.
Very crucial. Some clients don't want to know much about their business. Others want to know a lot about their business, and we're always happy for them to know.
Yeah.
When we negotiate these contracts, and the contracts are complicated, very complicated.
Yeah.
The artist needs to know, even if they don't want to read the contracts themselves, which we would like them to do.
Yeah.
They need to know the terms of those contracts. They need to know what they are signing.
Yeah.
They should never sign a contract, even if the lawyer hands it to them, unless they ask them, well, what does it say in this contract?
Yeah.
What's my royalty? What are my advances? What am I being paid? What are my approval rights?
Mm-hmm.
They need to know what some part of their business so that they're not taken by surprise.
Yeah.
Because there's an awful lot of people out there will take advantage of an artist if an artist allows them to do so.
Yeah. So it seems like the bottom line is that the artist has to take the responsibility to step forward and know what's going on, and there's no way around it.
Correct. There really is no way around it, because the people on the other side of many of these things, they will take advantage of an artist unless an artist protects themselves or have somebody that is there to do that job for them.
And it's interesting because, this kind of seems like common sense for life, period. Whether if you're going into an agreement, no matter what industry you're in, or maybe it's just a handshake deal with a neighbor, like you have to realize that that you will have to, not to sound like overly negative, but a lot of times, you'll have to realize that the other person is looking out for their self-interest, whether they're going to take advantage or not. I mean, that's besides the point, but you have to be aware that they're out for their self-interest. And
they're out for their self-interest. You have record companies who have very sophisticated lawyers and very sophisticated business people who have music publishers, very sophisticated lawyers, very sophisticated business experience. You have television companies the same way and motion picture companies the same way, and all of that. And the artist is on the other side of that, and they better have sophisticated representation to counter that. And simply because you're supplied with a contract that says it's a standard contract, there is no such thing as a standard contract in the industry, even though people like to think so. Yeah. There is no such thing. Every contract is negotiable. Every contract, and there are lots of complications in those contracts. There are lots of rights in those contracts, and you need to protect yourself. You need to have somebody to go through those contracts with a fine-tooth comb and protect your interest. Because if you don't, ultimately you will suffer and pay a price financially and career-wise.
And what's the so would you say that's the biggest mistake that you see artists make when it comes to the business side of the music business, is not seeking representation that's competent?
It is one of the biggest mistakes they make. It happens a lot. You see, an artist early on in the career, and this is what's very interesting and very tough. An artist at the early part of the career, they want to create, they want to perform, they want to write their music and all that, and they're willing to do, unfortunately, anything to become known, to be successful, to have their creative works loved by the public. Almost anything.
Yeah.
And so what we find out is many artists in the early stages of the career signed agreements, sometimes long-term contracts, that really suffocate their artistic life as well as their personal life. And it is crucial at the earlier stages that they find competent representation. Competent representation is available. A few phone calls, and they can find the right person that they trust to protect themselves.
Yeah.
But never sign a contract that's handed to you without that representation. Never, never, never.
So what would you recommend the first step to finding this competent representation?
Well, there's all kinds of ways to find that representation. There's endless lists published. There's the list of power lawyers. There's the list published by Variety magazine, by Variety, I should say, by Hollywood Reporter. The list of attorneys. You can go on the internet and find a list of the 100 top lawyers, the 200 top lawyers, and they're accessible and they're available. it's not difficult. There is the Beverly Hills Bar Entertainment Law Section, which has a referral department.
Yeah.
There's endless ways to find out the representative. Ask their friends. Ask around. You'll find the names.
Yeah. And what would be the ideal point in an artist's career where they would start looking for that representation? Would they be able
before they sign any contract?
So do you? What my question would be is, have you seen that artists, once they get that representation, do they have like a certain size of their fan base, or I mean, how do you? I'm just curious. How would you measure? Let's say like an artist that you would work with. How would you measure whether or not they're big enough to start getting representation?
There is no such thing as big enough. The question is, because they're probably not big enough at the beginning of their career. The question is, do they have the talent? Is there interest in them? Is there interest in them by the A&R people, the talent scouts of the industry? Is there interest by publishers? Is there interest by the public in them? They're not big enough at the early stage of the question, but that's where they need representation to protect their interests.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. Yeah.
They should not feel inadequate at that point. The question is, has interest been shown in them by the public, by a publisher, by a record executive, by a manager, by an agent? Has interest been shown in them?
Yeah.
Once interest is shown in them, or they're creating a stir, let's say on YouTube or something of that nature, that's the time to seek representation before any contract is signed.
Yeah. I think now we can. It's much. It's very easy to gauge the popularity or the size of an artist's audience just by looking at several different social media platforms. Not just one, but like you could look at their Facebook page, Twitter accounts, and YouTube channels in combination with each other. The artist can also be able to tell by looking at their own website traffic, or just gauging how many new people come up to their shows, how many tickets they sell. So that's actually, I can see that very, very easily telling, okay, now we're garnering a certain amount of interest from the public, so we want to start making sure that we're going to be protected just in case.
That they're properly represented, absolutely.
Yeah.
Remember, there are various people that service artists. Attorneys are one, managers are another, agents are another, business managers are another, PR people are another. So ultimately, a very successful artist has all of those, because they all do somewhat different functions. There's a little overlap, but mostly they're doing different functions.
Yeah.
And they're all important to an artist's career in one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like this term DIY musician, do-it-yourself musician, that floats around in the internet space a lot. And really, I think the confusion around that term is that that means you have to do everything yourself for your entire career, but that's not true. You need in the beginning, it's going to be you and your mom or you and your girlfriend.
That's true.
But as you hustle and you start building your audience, then you network and, keep your ear to the ground to find these other individuals, like whether they be lawyers or PR people or maybe a PR company to help you out, and you just kind of slowly add them to your team, or maybe you'll sign with a small label or get on with a larger label. But it's like
ultimately it becomes a team effort, and it is a team that works very closely for the artist. The artist ultimately, as a career gets bigger and bigger, they're so devoted to their careers and the performing and the interviews and everything else that goes with it. They need a team to function around them, and that team is usually the attorney, the manager, the agent, and the PR person, and a business manager. And that they protect their interests, they protect the monies that they are earning, they find the monies that should be paid to them. The music business as is television and motion pictures. It's a big business. And they have to realize that they are the talent. Ultimately, if they're successful, they're an enterprise. They're a big business.
Yeah.
They are a business. Okay.
Yeah.
And as any business would have, they have the proper executives, if you will.
Yeah.
In this case, it's the manager, the agent, the attorney, the business manager, to watch over that business, to protect that business, and do everything possible to make sure that the maximum income is earned for that artist on the basis of what they're creating. That's what the team is all about.
Yeah.
And a talent by themselves, they can't do all of that.
Yeah.
Nobody can do all of that.
Yeah, no, I can't. Not even the most like efficient, productive people on the planet can't like do what they do just all by themselves. They have to get the help. But I'm curious. There's one last point I want to hit up here, and this is in particular about governmental policy when it comes to how much artists get paid. So we can say something like pay for radio play, whether it's Pandora or terrestrial radio. Do you think? I know a lot of artists are just apathetic. Okay, let's just say they're apathetic when it comes to anything that has to do with government or lobbying Congress for their own interests, because there are these large tech companies and labels that have so much influence that there's a lot of apathy out there. So in your opinion, do you think artists can really influence government policy as it affects our income as musicians?
The answer is yes. First of all, understand this. The reason artists are able to make money out of their creations is because we have a copyright law. The copyright law is based on a provision in the Constitution of the United States, which says that authors are entitled to exclusive rights for a limited period of time, which is the copyright period of time, for their creations. It's in the Constitution. As a result of that, there is a copyright law.
Yeah.
The copyright law says to a creator, you own what you create. Okay? You create a song, you own it.
Yeah.
You create a master, a recording, you own it.
Yeah.
You create a film, you own it. You create a script, you own it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the copyright law says.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of that, you're entitled, because of the copyright laws and because of the Constitution, the artist is entitled to the earnings from their creation. Now, that's simply said, but now you get into the complications of what those rights are and all of that. And there are forces out there, should remain nameless, who want to limit those rights in one fashion or another, limit the rights of copyright, or limit the rights that the author has in those things. Mm-hmm. And it is up to the creators, the artists, to protect them. And the Congress, laws change from time to time. There was a major revision of the Copyright Act in 1976.
Yeah.
Because the Copyright Act goes back to 1909, and the last big one before that. And then there was major changes to bring it up to the digital age in the 90s, or in 95 and 98.
Yeah.
They're talking about more revisions now because of the new technologies and all that.
Yeah.
And it is vital for the artists to have their voices heard, because there are people on the other side who have a different view as to what the artist's rights are. Yeah. And it is possible to protect yourself. We have, on behalf of artists, I and other people have gone to Congress and brought artists with us, and we have met with senators and congressmen. We've appeared at hearings, and we have been effective over the time. I can't say 100% effective, but we have made a lot of progress in stating the case for artists' rights. And there's more things happening right now that need artists' input and need our artists' participation before Congress. And yes, there is something that can be done, because surprisingly, the congressmen and senators, they do respect artists. They like to hear from artists, and they are influenced by what artists have to say. So, no, they should not ignore it, but yes, they should participate.
Yeah. So it's like we as artists have a responsibility to get up and have our voice heard. And I know there's,
that's correct.
I had mentioned actually last time we talked that artist Blake Morgan in his I Respect Music campaign, where he's campaigning for fair radio play with Congress. So it's like once you start to, as an artist, at least for me as a musician, once I started looking for solutions or looking for artists that were speaking up, like you'll find that there are, it's like I wouldn't have known that that you were doing the same thing, that you were lobbying for artists' rights, and I wouldn't have found out about Blake Morgan unless I was looking for it. So I definitely encourage like any artist or musician to look out there for other artists speaking up and band together, whether that means traveling to Capitol Hill, or maybe it means signing an electronic petition.
Yeah, we've done various things. There was a move for legislation by a certain company about 2 years ago, or maybe within the past year, and it would have severely impacted artists' rights. And we got something like, a number of us got together. We got 150 major artists to sign a major ad, and took out an ad on it. It influenced Congress to such an extent that the bill was dropped.
Yeah.
So, and once a year, the Recording Academy lines up a group of artists that go to Washington, D.C. somewhere around April. It's called Grammys on the Hill. And they go around and with a set agenda, and they go in groups of about 10, and they go to various preset meetings with congressmen and senators, and let the artists speak and tell them what's on their mind. Usually there's certain issues that they will discuss at the time. So there are things that are going on that they can participate in, but it's part of their business, because the people on the opposite side of the artist's interest, they're doing it, and so the artists can't hide. The artists have to stand up, because Congress will listen to the people that come before them. If they only hear from the opposite side and they don't hear the artists, and the artists are going to come out losing all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you don't show up to the boxing match, you're going to lose.
You'll lose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jay, I'm going to be respectful of your time here. This has been an awesome interview, really insightful. I hope any musician listening to this is going to be encouraged to step up and have your voice be heard when it comes to artists' rights. But thanks again, Jay, for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You have a good day. Bye.
Sure.
And that wraps up this week's episode of Seeds of Music. Make sure to check out Jay's links below and get acquainted with the service he has to offer. And if you think you need that proper representation, then reach out to him. Next, if you haven't yet, sign up for our email newsletter, Seeds of Music newsletter. You get updates on new interviews, vlog episodes, articles, plus special newsletter content to help you build a bigger fan base and sell more music online. And also, lastly, subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and a review. That'll help the show get ranked, help us get more exposure and get more ears on the show. Did you like this interview? Make sure to like it on Facebook and share it with all your friends and tweet it out on Twitter. Share this information with as many musicians as you can. And lastly, comment on the video. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on these interviews. Do you have any ideas for subjects you'd like to hear covered? Do you know someone who should be on this show? Or is that person you? Just send me an email to kyle.seedsofmusic@gmail.com. At the most, it will take me 2 days to get back to you, but rest assured, I go through every single email that comes in my email inbox. And remember, we are the future of music.